The sun had the color of a gold coin slipping through a child's fingers, bright, impossible, and just out of reach. On a cracked public court in the outskirts of Mainz, a girl in a faded tracksuit bounced a tennis ball with the solemnity of someone tapping a metronome. The rhythm held the shape of her breath, the line of her future. The ball slapped the strings and sprang back, a small percussion that punctuated the hush between the trees and the distant hum of traffic. The world felt enormous and silent at once, as if the earth had pressed pause so that her footsteps could fill it. She watched the ball as if it were an oracle, eyes narrowing with the concentration of a mind learning to turn a simple act into destiny. The string vibration throbbed through the wooden racket into her hand, through her wrist, into a heart that already understood what discipline and hunger sounded like. Somewhere behind her, a coach called out corrections. Somewhere else, a parent's voice mixed with laughter and the metallic clank of a gate. But in those private seconds, the girl and the ball existed in a universe built of geometry and light, the arc of a serve, the shaving of wind across the baseline, the taste of chalk dust on her tongue. This was where she learned to cultivate silence into steel, where touch became technique and instinct braided with training into something that would, one day, command stadiums and history. The story of Steffi Graf is the story of a quiet force learning to speak. It begins not with trophies glittering under stadium lights, but with repetition in sunlight and rain, with the slow accretion of hours that no camera ever captures, endless forehands struck against a rebound wall, early mornings when the dew still weighs on the grass, and afternoons when blistered feet are wrapped in bandages and resolve. It is the story of a childhood watched over by encouraging parents, of a sibling cheering after a hard-fought point, and of a coach who sees not only what the girl is but what she might become. It is the unlikely alchemy of natural talent and relentless labor, of a nervous laugh that becomes a grin of tactical clarity, of a shy teenager developing into a champion with an almost sacred relationship to the court. There is grace in the way she moved, not the flamboyant grace of showmanship, but the efficient grace of an athlete who economizes motion to convert energy into precision. Observers would say she had a weapon, that trademark forehand, a whip of steel and silk that could alter the geography of a match. Yet her real advantage was a quieter thing, composure. She learned to make the stadium into a controlled environment, to translate pressure into focus and expectation into oxygen for performance. To understand her rise is to understand small choices magnified, the decision to stay after practice when teammates left, the willingness to adapt a swing, the acceptance of a loss as a tutor rather than a verdict. It is to see how coach and family built a scaffold of support strong enough to stand against the ferocity of competition and the fickleness of fame. It is to recognize the moments where fate leaned toward her, a key victory that sparks belief, an injury overcome with stubborn patience, an inner voice that says insistently, keep going, but the story does not mythologize. It portrays setbacks with the clarity of someone who knows pain, matches lost by inches, seasons of doubt, the loneliness of travel, the negotiations of personal life against the demands of the circuit. And woven through is a humanity that made her beloved, her humility in victory, the honesty in interviews, the private rituals, the walk before a Grand Slam final, a small talisman tucked into a bag, the quiet handshake with an opponent that acknowledged mutual respect. The tale that unfolds will carry you from the chalked courts of a German childhood to the blazing arenas of New York, London, Paris, and Melbourne. From the fragile triumphs of adolescence to the perfections of a calendar year completed in golden symmetry. It will move through the summers of training, the winters of recovery, the private rooms where decisions about career and family are weighed, and the electrified arenas where a nation holds its breath as she sizes up an opponent. You will hear imagined dialogues, feel the scraper of sweat under stadium lights, taste the metallic tang of nerves before match point, and witness the moments where glory is earned in the quiet, stubborn hours no one else gets to see. We will travel with her, through victories that rewrite possibility, through losses that instruct, through a personal life that blossoms with its own complexity, through a retirement that surprises the world and a legacy that endures. We will linger on the sound of a ball off racket, on the hush before a serve, on the collective in-breath of tens of thousands waiting for a return. This is not merely a chronology of matches won and records set. It is an invitation into the inner life of an athlete who made her sport both art and instrument. It is a meditation on how greatness forms, not as a sudden explosion but as a patient, inevitable emergence, and on how a single person, through focus and heart, can leave an indelible mark on the world. So take your seat, let the lights dim, and step into the cadence of a life lived at match point, where every choice echoes and every moment matters. Her earliest memories are painted with the smell of fresh apples and the cadence of her mother's voice. She remembers a small kitchen in Mannheim where laughter rose like steam, where a father who loved sport more than words would trace the game on a napkin, sketching tactics and possibilities with a slow, contented smile. The Graf household was a place where discipline and warmth coexisted. The children were encouraged to try, fail, and try again. At 5, she was given her first racket, a flimsy piece of wood that felt enormous in her tiny hands. She swung it with the seriousness of a ritual, the swing a little wild, like a fledgling learning to flap against wind. Her parents noticed. They noticed not because they were pushy, but because they saw light in her when she connected solidly to the ball. Her father, Peter, former athlete himself, spoke quietly but firmly about fundamentals. Repeat, breathe, watch the ball, he would say, his breath fogging in winter practice, the words becoming a liturgy. Her mother, Heidi, kept the ledger of practice hours and health, quietly ensuring routines were kept. Together they constructed an environment that allowed a child's curiosity to become craft. Her brother Michael played alongside her, a companion in the early rituals of the court. They chased balls, argued about imaginary scores, and later celebrated small victories, as if each were a coronation. As she grew, coaches began to see a pattern, a court sense that bordered on clairvoyance, a footwork economy that rendered other players' movements sluggish by comparison, and that forehand, a motion at once compact and explosive, a whip that had a signature. She learned the geometry of the court intuitively, angles fascinated her like puzzles. Training sessions lengthened then multiplied, and the routine of practice, endurance sprints at dawn, technical drills beneath the gray German sky, match simulations that felt more real than any game, became the loom on which her talent was woven into discipline. But the path was not merely physical, it required emotional training too. She learned to manage expectations not as a burden but as a compass, to treat public interest as a background hum rather than an instruction. There were junior tournaments, regional circuits where she tasted the first bittersweet blend of victory and defeat. At 14, she began to travel for events, the rhythm of airports and hotel rooms becoming as familiar as any training court. Each trip was a lesson in adaptation. New surfaces demanded new footwork, different balls required a tweak in timing, unfamiliar opponents challenged not only skill but strategy. Her teenage years were a study in balance. The world expected prodigy, she felt like an apprentice. She navigated schoolwork, friendship, and the growing reality that her life was taking a shape that included long absences and adoring eyes. Coaches introduced strength training, and she discovered the importance of core and legs in powering that signature forehand. A dietitian mapped out nutrition with the precision of a chemist. Sleep schedules were regimented, and recovery rituals, ice baths, massage, and gentle stretches became sacraments. Despite the regimen, she retained small rebellions of youth, a late-night call home, a favorite song hummed on a bus ride, a stolen pastry shared with a teammate. These moments tethered her to a normalcy that would otherwise have been drowned by the glare of performance. Her breakout did not arrive as a single meteoric leap but in a series of escalations, an upset over a seeded player in juniors that turned heads followed by steady improvements and a string of wins that suggested not just talent but adaptability. When she first stepped into a Grand Slam draw, the size of the stadium felt comical and holy simultaneously. The lights were a sun, the seats a galaxy. Yet she met the scale with a peculiar calm, as if the court were merely a familiar room rearranged. She learned to use crowd noise like weather, a factor to be accounted for but not lamented. With each match, her confidence hardened into steel. With each victory, the media narratives tried to carve her into a star, but she remained stubbornly herself, soft-spoken, intensely private, and fiercely committed to the work. Journalists would ask about her emotions after a major win, and she would answer simply, almost awkwardly, as if explaining her steps in a recipe. I prepared. I focused. I executed. The simplicity was deceptive. Beneath it lay a complex architecture of preparation. Her first major title felt like confirmation more than surprise. The trophy itself was cool and heavy in her hands, the medal's weight puncturing the surrealness of the moment. Camera flashes turned into stroboscopic confetti. Fans chanted in a chorus that blurred into a single note, celebration. She stood at the net with an opponent who had been both rival and teacher, and in the handshake there was recognition, an acknowledgement that both had been sharpened by the contest. The victory launched her into a new orbit, endorsements, invitations, and a public persona that would have swallowed someone less rooted. But she navigated the newfound attention with a scholar's care, protecting what was essential, the quietude of practice, the intimacy of family, the small rituals that kept her tethered. There were matches that became legends. Some nights, under rain-slick light or a crystalline summer sky, the way she moved made time feel elastic. Fans would hold their breath as she ran along the baseline, transforming defense into offense with a single clean stroke. Spectators remember not only the winning points, but the way she exhaled after a long rally, the smile that flickered across her face as if she had shared a private joke with the ball. She developed rivalries that read like narratives. Matches against players whose styles contrasted sharply with hers became moral dramas of strategy and temperament. Some opponents attacked with power, others with crafty angles. She answered with precision, speed, and a mental acuity that could reroute a match's momentum in a single tactical change. In press rooms, pundits debated whether it was her athleticism or her mind that made the difference. She would sometimes respond with a small laugh and say neither was enough without the other. You can have the body, but the mind finds the court. Injuries came, as they do to any athlete who pushes the body to its fringe. There were days when pain made concentration almost impossible and nights of sterile clinic lights and whispered consultations with medical staff. Rehab was less glamorous than victory parades. Repetitions repeated until muscles responded, incremental gains measured like currency. Those moments revealed her patience and acceptance. Instead of rushing, she treated recovery as another phase of training. She learned to listen to her body in ways many elite athletes never do until forced. The result was resilience. When she returned to the court, there was often a fresh layer of tactical nuance, a renewed appreciation for the sweet friction of competition. Alongside her professional ascent, her personal life unfurled in ways that both complicated and completed her. The public watched as she formed friendships with fellow players, found solace in quiet rituals, and eventually fell in love. She guarded her private life carefully, but joy leaked through in simple acts, a holiday with family, laughter shared over a private joke, the comfort of a partner's steady presence. These relationships grounded her in the turbulence of a touring life and, later, guided decisions about retirement and legacy. When the time came to step away from the constant circuit of competition, there was no dramatic cliff so much as a gentle slope, a conscious choice informed by reflection on health, priorities, and the desire to cultivate a life beyond the scoreboard. Her final seasons were a study in gratitude. The applause felt like a benediction. She played with a softer intensity, as if each match were a gift rather than a demand. Fans came to sentinel the last chapters of her career, and she repaid them with performances that threaded nostalgia with brilliance. When she finally stepped off the court, it was with the quiet dignity that had defined her rise, not a handful of words and a life that had evolved from a small court in Mainz into a global narrative. The legacy she left behind was manifold. Records etched into the sports ledger, styles of play studied by aspiring players, and a personal example of humility married to excellence. But the story did not end with farewell speeches. She found ways to translate competitive intensity into other forms, philanthropy that reflected a desire to give back, a mentor's ear to young players, and a family life that allowed her to nurture the person she had been hiding behind a racket. Her post-competitive years revealed different strengths: the patience of parenting, the tenderness of partnership, the curiosity to explore interests outside of tennis. Each a stanza in a song that had always been in her heart, but had been undergirded by a career as necessary focus. Imagine now a final montage. Courts drying after rain, a lone ball rolling to a stop near the net. Children laughing as they chase shadows across the baseline. A woman walking slowly through a garden, sunlight freckling her face. In these images, you see completion, not cessation. You see a life in which the energy that once drove to victory now seeds new beginnings. And you see the truth that the measure of greatness is not only in trophies but in the way one's life continues to influence and inspire. As the film of her career fades to black, one line remains luminous: greatness is a habit, not an accident. Behind the medal, viewers, if you liked this story, please like, share, And subscribe so more stories like this can reach fans who love the human side of sport.